Hi.
Hello,
How's everybody
everyone.
doing?
Hello. I know that was weird. I was the first one on and I thought,
Well, I got an email just a few minutes ago to set up Owen's popcorn sales. So I wanted to go ahead and do that.
Ah, very good.
Yes. So I wanted to make sure I got that done because I wanted to share it with all of you, his online popcorn orders. And just in case you thought you might
Just
want
in
to
case.
buy some popcorn.
Okay.
So.
And do we have to do it online?
Oh no, I've got an order form. I've got an in-person order form, and I can drop it
Okay.
at the church. So, yeah.
That's
Alrighty.
good. Hello,
I
everyone.
need to
Hello. Chris, do we know how many are coming Saturday?
I think that it will be at least 2.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And since last week didn't work out, are you still planning to do the graders this week, or should I plan for a dessert?
I'm planning to do the graders again.
Okay. All righty. Well, I'm all set then.
Okay, that should make sure that works here. It does. Okay, good deal. Okay, so the thing is with the let me go get the in-person order form because they're different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I love popcorn.
Yes, it is good. Do your girls like popcorn, Beth?
I am trying really hard to keep them from eating people food. Jennifer, my girls are my 2 cats.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I have one boy. His name is Jake, my dog.
We've seen Jake. He's a cutie.
You've seen him. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Well, let me see. It's just maybe just a few more minutes, see if we get anybody else here.
Okay.
And that will give me some time to eat a little bit also. I have my dinner here. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So
Not busy or
Henry.
anything, are you?
I took Owen around selling popcorn.
Ah,
Mm-hmm.
Is that for Boy Scout, Cub Scouts?
Yeah, for Cub Scouts. Mm-hmm. Horseradish hits you.
no. So what's for dinner?
Well, Allie had me put a roast in the
Ooh,
slow cooker this morning,
nice.
and then she made roast potatoes and green beans to go with it.
Oh,
I threw it all into a bowl with some horseradish sauce.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm. And because we almost never cook and it's a fancy meal, I am drinking a glass of wine.
Oh, very nice.
And I hope nobody will judge me, but it's 7 o'clock at night.
Absolutely.
Absolutely not.
And I always say if it was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Looks like Denise is having trouble hearing. So she's
Mhm.
going to sign off and back on. So Well, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
I can't remember who I asked to pray. I think I asked Gary to pray last week. So, Beth, do you mind praying for us? It's real easy.
Oh.
I promise. There are
Okay.
no bad prayers.
All right. Well, that's good. Okay. Here, let's be in prayer. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day and for all of the blessings that we've had, whether it be with friends or family members, just all those great experiences that you provide for us throughout the day. We're grateful that we're all together this evening, and for those who can't be with us, we ask that you please be with them and bring them comfort and safety until we can meet again. And we thank you for all of the lessons we'll learn this evening and for Chris's leadership. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And thank you, Beth. Denise, can you hear us now? All right, good, wonderful. All right. Well, I will give you all a choice. In the Tuesday night, we decided to start with chapter 26 because it felt more linear to do that and then to go back and talk about Jacob and Esau. So would you like to go in order, starting in verse 19, chapter 25, in the order it's written, or more in the order of how it happened with starting in chapter 26?
I think I would prefer to do the way it happened, since that's not the way I read it. So it might be kind of interesting that way.
I think it will make more sense to do it that way, and it'll help us to keep some things in mind also. So that sounds good. So we'll start in chapter 26.
Okay.
With Isaac. That way, we just finished Abraham. Now we can talk about Isaac, and then we can talk about Jacob instead of kind of going back and forth. So we'll start in chapter 26. Would somebody read for us verses 1 through 11, please?
I'll do that.
Thank you, Norma.
Got a shadow over my shoulder here with the light behind me. Okay, now there was a famine in the land besides the former famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Gerar and to King Okay, say it for me once. Abimelech. There we go. Of the Philistines. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Settle in the land that I shall show you. Reside in this land as an alien, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will fulfill the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all of these lands, and all the nations of the earth shall gain blessings for themselves through your offspring, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." So Isaac settled in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." For he was afraid to say my wife, thinking, or else the men of the place might kill me for the sake of Rebekah, because she is attractive in appearance. When Isaac had been there a long time, King Abimelech of the Philistines looked out of the window and saw him fondling his wife Rebekah. So Abimelech called for Isaac and said, "So she is your wife. Why then did you say she is my sister?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought I might die because of her." Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So Abimelech warned all of the people, saying, "Whoever touches this man or his wife shall be put to death."
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Norma.
You're welcome.
My goodness, this family just doesn't seem to be able to learn, do they? Hi, Sam. Hi, Ann.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
Hi.
Oh,
We just got started, but we decided to start at chapter 26 since it's stories about Isaac, and then we'll go back to the Jacob and Esau story after that. So we are not super far ahead, I promise.
Okay.
Yeah. So, all right. So verses 1 through 11, chapter 26, sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. What stands out to you from this story? What seems similar? What seems different from the Abraham stories? And what are you thinking when you read through this?
well, similar is that Isaac is doing the same thing that his father Abraham did. And it's interesting that it's the same king who is involved in it. It's kind of a repeat. So, and also I thought it was interesting that Isaac's reasoning was the same as Abraham's, you know, that he might be killed over this.
Seems like that must have been a common thing back then
Yeah.
in order
Yeah.
for them both to have the same concern.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, they talk about the patience of Job. I want to talk about the patience of Abimelech. To me, he seems to have been very patient with this family.
Yeah.
You know, it makes me wonder how much Abraham told Isaac about his life before Isaac was born.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't seem like Isaac really knows what to do here. So I don't know, maybe the lesson here is to tell your kids about your mistakes so they don't repeat them. What about in the first 5 verses?
He makes a promise to Isaac too, like he did to Abraham.
Same promise.
God did, I should say.
What about verse 5? That seems interesting. Do you think, here's the question comes up again. Is the promise contingent upon the faithfulness of this family?
Well, he is kind of putting it out there, making sure that Isaac realizes that Abraham obeyed him and kept his requirements, and his commands and decrees and laws. So I think it was probably good that he did that and reminded Isaac about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, if you read really carefully, Isaac doesn't have to do anything. At least not yet. Anyway, that God's
Not yet.
promise to Isaac is because of what Abraham did.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to prove anything, it doesn't look like,
Yeah.
or prove.
No, it doesn't seem that way, no. But he remains faithful to God, as we see in the next couple of verses.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so it's almost like he doesn't have to do anything for the promise to apply to him, but the faithfulness of each generation will matter for whether or not the promise continues to apply to the next generation. So I asked the Tuesday night group this. I asked them, if Abraham had not been faithful, had turned away from God, had said, I don't want anything to do with you, had gone after the Canaanite gods, whatever, do you think God would have tried to continue with the promise to him, or do you think God would have maybe found somebody else? Let's leave aside the question over God knew that Abraham was going to be faithful anyway and all that other stuff. Let's leave that aside. But if Abraham had been unfaithful, then would God have needed to go with somebody else?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough question.
I think God would have given Abraham another chance or even a third chance. And then maybe said, 3 strikes, you're out. I'll find somebody else. But I think that he would have tried to get Abraham turned around. Because I think that's what God does for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think even though Abraham made some mistakes, he was never, he never turned away from God. He maybe had some issues with trusting God on a few occasions and trusting in that promise, but he never said, okay, I'm done with you, God. He never turned away. He never went after other gods. He never turned away from God. And, it's the same with us. Sometimes we fall, even in our attempts to follow God's will. Sometimes we fail. We're not perfect. But I think there's a difference between, falling short, sinning, and becoming unfaithful, I guess.
That's a good point. I never thought of that.
But on the flip side, I think the promise is always there. So even if we do at some point decide, I don't want anything to do with you, God. I go back to the story of the prodigal son. He's still standing there with arms open if we ever decide to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think it's kind of the same with Israel, that they might, because sometimes they turn away from God. Later on in the story, they go after idols. God sends his prophet, say, hey, come back to me. And then they turn back. I mean, the whole Bible is sort of the story of Israel turning away from God and turning back, turning away, and then turning back.
Yeah. It's like Beth said. It's like Beth said. He gives us lots of chances. He doesn't turn away from us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that. Even if we might turn away from God, he never turns away from us.
Mm-hmm.
True.
I like that.
Yeah. That is good.
I wanted to point out, because somebody asked on Tuesday night, we were talking about the names of things. As we get into the next verses, we'll read about Isaac naming the wells, why that was important. And the names, they all mean something. I think we've kind of talked about that before. So like Bethel means house of God. The El is the Hebrew word for God, and Bet is the word for house. And we'll see when Jacob has the dream about the angels ascending and descending on the ladder and the heavens being open, and he wakes up, he says, surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. And that's where we get the hymn from. And then he names that place Bethel, house of God. So if you live anywhere near Bethel Road, you're almost there.
Just goes to show
Um,
how close our church is to Bethel Road.
That's
Look how
right.
close Northwest is.
That's true.
But Abimelech, so the Hebrew word for king is Melech. Hebrew word for father is Ab. Somebody asked what Abba meant on Tuesday night, and that means it's the diminutive for father. So it's like daddy, basically. Dad, daddy. And so Abimelech would mean like father of all kings, basically. Just a little Hebrew trivia for you in case you were interested.
It is interesting.
Let's look at the next couple of verses here. Would somebody read verses 12 through 22 for us?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Isaac sowed seed in that land, and in the same year reaped 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich. He prospered more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks and herds and a great household, so that the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped up and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us. You have become too powerful for us." So Isaac departed from there and camped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found the well of spring water, the herders of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herders, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the well Ezek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also. So he called it Sitnah. He moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called it Rehoboth, saying, "Now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land."
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I just got a huge mouthful of horseradish.
Oh dear.
I'm okay. Thank you. Okay, so what in this section, is there anything that stands out to you, or any questions you might have from this part of the story?
I thought it was kind of odd that they filled the wells up. I guess
Me too. Yeah.
I just-
that-
that's just mean.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
and it seems to me like they were evidently using the wells. It seemed like it was kind of a stupid thing to do.
Yeah, we talked on Tuesday night about the phrase "cut off your nose to spite your face."
Yeah.
You heard that phrase before?
Yes.
There seems to be a little bit of that going on here, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because I don't read it that I think he's hoarding. I just think that he's been blessed with this. And I see it differently than as a threat, or, he's trying to hoard everything for himself. I think Lord blessed him, so he reaped the benefits.
It doesn't say that he's hoarding anything.
He could have shared. I mean, maybe that was his intent, but when you're asked to leave, he was going to leave.
One thing I thought it was interesting, and I never thought about, is reading verse 12 in conjunction with verse 1 of chapter 26. There's a famine in the land. Now, he was on his way down to Egypt, but God stopped him from going there because it wasn't time to go to Egypt yet. And so he settled in Gerar. Now, Gerar is still in the land of Israel. It's on the southernmost border. And so there still would have been a famine. And he was able to reap 100-fold that year, the year that there was a famine, because of the blessings that God had given to him.
That's a lot.
Well, if the Philistines did not reap like that, I guess you could see why they were upset with him then. If they were all in the same place.
Well, it seems to be very different than in Joseph's time when there was a famine and he was kind of in charge of distributing food and helping people. And either Isaac wasn't interested in doing that, or, maybe it just never even crossed his mind to help out his neighbors with the famine. I don't know. But instead of sending him away, maybe it would have been good for them to try and figure out how he could help them.
Maybe. I agree. Joseph's my favorite.
Yeah. Mine too.
He comes off much better than all the rest of these.
Yeah.
But you know what I noticed is that the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they're not whitewashed, right? They're not cleaned up and made all nice and pretty. Especially Jacob, who becomes Israel, the namesake of the whole nation. And you would think that a nation writing about its history would try to make its founders sound like close to God almost, these really great, wonderful individuals. And they come across as perfectly human with strengths and weaknesses. And you can see, we saw Abraham grow over time in his faith. And we'll see the same with Jacob. There's not really that much material for Isaac, but we do see a little bit of growth here at the end with his with the oath that he makes in the interest of peace. So it struck me that he didn't, when he dug the wells and then the herders of Gerar quarreled with him and said, "This water's ours," he didn't fight them for it. He just moved on and dug another well.
Mhm. Why did they not quarrel over the third one?
I bet.
Wonder.
I wish that Dave Billman was here, because I bet he would tell you it had something to do with the number 3 being God's perfect number.
Yeah, that's
Good
right.
point.
Because it must have been a real undertaking to do one of those wells, Chris.
I would think so. And
Yeah.
if the soil out there is anything like the soil here in Ohio, I don't see how they did it with their schools.
Mm-mm.
The landscaper that did the labyrinth project for us out on the church lawn, he said that the soil that he dug out to prepare for the labyrinth was like 95% rock,
Right.
and 5% dirt.
Chris, along the Scioto River, that's one of the largest lime deposits in the country.
Really?
Along
I did
the
not
Scioto
know that.
River. Yes. If you look, there's quarries all up and down the Scioto River. And when we lived there, I would dig down about a foot and I'd run into limestone. So to have a garden, I ended up with a pickaxe and hauled all the limestone out and then had to fill it with dirt.
I think when we
are
built
fine.
the ministry center, I think they encountered quite a bit of limestone there and had to dig that out as well,
Mhm.
So like it says, upon this rock, I will build my church.
right?
Look at it that way.
That's a good point.
That'll make for
yeah,
a good sermon, Brett.
But you're right. I think it probably was a pretty big task to be able to dig these wells. Isaac definitely had plenty of help because with that wealth came people power.
Mhm.
So that's part of the reason that they said, you've become too powerful for us. Remember, Abraham had like 300 warriors at his disposal. And so certainly, when we think about it's much different, from today when you think about maybe somebody's rich and they live in a nice house, but they still have their nuclear family, back then you had a household and that consisted of servants and extended family and livestock and just the whole estate that you could move kind of from place to place. So preview for this week's sermon.
Ah.
How it used to be. Not the slave part. We're glad to be rid of that, but living in giant communities versus just a little old house. So
Like when we were growing up, the neighbors took care of all of us.
Mhm.
takes a village.
Yes, it does.
To raise Norma.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Let's move on.
Yes, let's move on.
Well, before we move on, I do want to point out verse 22. That he's got now water is life. We mentioned that in the desert, water is very important. It's life. And so Jane was asking, okay, why is he making a point to name these wells? On Tuesday night, she was asking, it's the same reason why communities here in the US sprung up close to major riverways for the most part. And now a lot of the cities are on fresh bodies of water, right?
Mhm.
And you have to have water. So in the desert, your only really reliable source of water is a well. And so it's not just a well, it is a location of settlement. It's where you would put down roots. And so, for example, Beer-sheba to this day is a major city in Israel. So naming these places, it's not just naming the well, it's naming the place, and the place becomes over time a settlement, a town, a village, a city.
Mhm.
And so the fact that he's got a well now that nobody's fighting over that can be his, he says the Lord has made room for us in this land. And so it's just sort of another kind of a down payment on the promise of land by God to this family. Never mind that Abraham had dug all those wells already before, but
Right. Mhm.
So would he have traveled very far between digging those wells? Or are they all?
I don't know how far he would have traveled. I would have to look it up and see. I don't even know if we know where these places are today.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not familiar with well technology to say how far away you have to put a one well from another. I don't know. But they traveled quite a ways back then. You know, it was kind of everyday occurrence.
Mm-hmm. But the first two wells were already wells that had been filled in with dirt from before, right? When during Abraham's time? Is that how I
Well,
understood that?
I don't know. Now, it seems that in verse 18, Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham,
Mhm.
which the Philistines had stopped them up.
Right.
And he gave them the names his father had given them. And then verse 19 seems to be a different occurrence when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water. So I think maybe these are new wells
Mm.
because they get new names.
I was going to say, if they were previously dug wells that were filled in, did he have a map to know where to dig?
Well, maybe it was that, just like what you were saying, Pastor Chris, about that there were cities there. Maybe that's why he was threatening, because it wasn't just the water, but that people came around and then kind of had an allegiance to him, if you will, or he was the leader, viewed as the leader. And that's why he was powerful.
That's a possibility. Yeah. Well, let's go to the next part here. Would somebody read verses 23 through 33? So not to the end of the chapter. We're going to say verses 34 and 35 for later. But would somebody read verses 23 through 33?
I can do that.
Thank you, Jennifer.
From there, he went up to Beer-sheba, and that very night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you and will bless you and make your offspring numerous for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there, called on the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar with Abuzeth, his advisor, and Phicol, the commander of the army. Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me and have sent me away from you? They said, we see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we say, let there be an oath between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, so that you will do us no harm. Just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace, you are now the blessed of the Lord. So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they rose early and exchanged oaths, and Isaac sent them on their way. And they departed from him in peace. That same day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well they had dug, and said to him, we have found water. That's where you want me to stop, right? Or keep reading?
Just one more.
He called it Sheba. Therefore, the name of the city is Beer-sheba to this day.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. So this should also seem rather familiar. If you remember chapter 21, when Abimelech had a similar oath with Abraham. I think it's interesting that Abimelech does not seem to realize there's no mention that Isaac knows that Abimelech had prior dealings with his father, or that Abimelech knows that Isaac is Abraham's son, or there's just nothing here to tell us one way or the other.
But in both situations, he realizes that the Lord was with Abraham and is now with Isaac. You know, he says that same thing in both chapters.
That's a good point. It's almost like Abimelech is a third party witness to the relationship that both Abraham had with God, and now Isaac has the same relationship with God.
Yeah.
That's really cool, because it almost makes me feel like this chapter is here to tell us that Isaac had the same faithful relationship with God that Abraham had with God, because it includes God giving him the promise, and it includes God's blessing on him, and then Abimelech's recognition of that God is with him.
Yeah.
So it sounds similar. It sounds like all the same stories that Abraham went through, but it's almost like an affirmation. Okay, God was with Abraham, God is with Isaac, and God is going to continue to be with each subsequent descendant in this family down through the generations. Thank you, Beth.
Chris, I was just thinking, it must have been a huge undertaking to move. I mean, you have all those tents, all the animals, all the help and everything. I mean, it wasn't just like you and I decide to go from the one block to another block, or one end of town to the other end of town. And because they have to take everything with them.
True.
It's true. Although Owen just started Cub Scouts, and I'm beginning to remember my Boy Scout days. And if you've ever seen a Boy Scout jamboree, all of the troops coming into one place and pitching their tents, and then leaving on Sunday morning, they make quick work of it.
Right.
Right.
It reminds me when the Boy Scouts clean up the tables in the ministry center. They make quick work of it, for sure, too.
But you're right. It would have been a lot to move, a lot more than just one house.
Many hands make light work.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. If they were herders, they probably moved the herds, because you can't keep the herd in one place if they're
Yes.
grazing. So
Right.
It reminds me of, I was watching the Netflix movie about Marco Polo, and how the Mongols under the Kublai Khan, how they had herds of horses, and similarly they still, I think, move around. They move their yurts. So that's what I had in my mind when I'm thinking how they're moving around, moving their sheep.
Yurts.
One of the last truly nomadic people left.
The Mongols, the
Mhm.
Mongolians. Yeah, it's interesting.
If we look at that map from Gerar down to Beer-sheba, that's probably a total of 20 miles. So maybe over, I don't know how long it might take, but if he's moving the herd, maybe it's just a couple weeks or a couple months that they might travel that distance.
Mhm.
But they didn't have all the junk that we carry with us in our homes.
That's true.
They traveled much lighter.
I bet they could do it a couple days,
Yeah,
a
Yeah.
day or two. Normal walking speed is about 3 miles an hour. And then if you figure you're laden with things and you got to move a whole bunch of people, maybe a couple days.
are they moving their herds as well of animals?
I would think so, yeah. Yeah, you got to wait on those. One thing I thought was interesting is verses 27 through 29. Isaac and Abimelech seem to have different ideas about what went down when Abimelech sent him away earlier in the
Mhm.
story. Isaac says, you know, why have you come to me seeing that you hate me and have sent me away from you? And Abimelech says, we have not touched you, have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace.
Right.
So, you know, to me, it kind of goes to show how two people can have different views of the same event,
Mhm.
different perspectives on what happened, and the importance of communication and talking to each other through what each person perceives from a conflict.
Right. So it seems like actually when Abimelech sent him away, he was doing it for Isaac's safety, because he saw that what, you know, he could see that the people were getting jealous and everything, and that it could cause a problem. So, and actually, if you look there, you know, like up here in like 20 and 19, and then in 21 through the end, Isaac actually kept using that strategy of leaving to not have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But then Isaac kind of confronts Abimelech to say, you know, like to share his viewpoint that I thought you hated me.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets cleared up.
And in the end, Isaac ends up negotiating for peace.
Mm-hmm.
They leave things off peaceful.
Yeah.
Brings back that old saying, going back to the two of them, it isn't what I said, it's what you heard I said.
Mm-hmm.
It's my
Sometimes
kids,
that's caused a lot of wars and a lot of problems during.
and as my kids would say, it's your tone of voice.
Yes.
Mm.
I don't know, Chris, have you ever been to a meeting or a group of men where you're doing studies and everything, and they say that you're sitting there and you say a phrase to the guy next to you, and then he passes it on to the next one, and then passes it on to the next one and the next one and so on. And by the time it gets to the end, it's nowhere near what you originally said.
Yeah, telephone. Telephone.
Yes.
We used to play that all the time when I was a kid. So I did that as one of our activities on the youth mission trip. Just a simple game of telephone, and I had them play it a little bit differently, but we started with just a regular game of telephone. And Randy Brewer, he said he never played that before. He had never played telephone before. And so we explained the rules to him. Well, we played it, and for the rest of the week, I kid you not, he was talking about, he loved telephone. He wanted to keep playing it.
That's so funny.
So we got to introduce Randy to the game of telephone. No, it's a great game, but a good lesson how messages can get mixed between two
Okay.
people. What I said and what you heard,
Yes.
slightly different.
Mhm.
And this day and age, social media doesn't help that whole situation.
Mhm.
That's for
That's right.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue. We don't have time to get into
Yeah.
that.
But pass on that.
We could spend
Suffice
a lot
to
of time
say,
on.
suffice to say, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
So they go away in peace, and he names it the same name that Abraham gave the well earlier, Beer-sheba. So it's got a name that it's got two different meanings. Remember, well of the seven, because Abraham had the 7 ewes at the first oath that he offered to secure the covenant. But it also means well of the oath. And so now it's almost got it's got two different origin stories. It's got the oath that Abraham made with Abimelech, and now it's got the oath that Isaac made with Abimelech. And Beer-sheba is still a city to this day.
Right.
Let's see if I can pull it up here, just in case you wanted to see it. I showed it on Tuesday night. I was able to pull it up on the map here.
It's like southeast of that town of Nabar or Bar, whatever the name of it was. Gerar.
Gerar?
Yeah, it's just southeast of that, about 2 fingers,
Yeah.
which is 20 miles.
So I am going to, let's see if I can share this here. Here's a modern day map. Here's Google Maps. After I said that you can't trust everything on the internet. Well, Google Maps is pretty accurate. Here's Israel, right? Here's Gaza. Here's Jerusalem. Here's Beer-sheba right here.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. So it's
So it's the city in Israel right there. Continued on to this day. I think it's pretty cool. I was looking to see if I could see Esek or Rehoboth or anything like that. I don't see any of those.
Route number.
Mhm.
But there it is. It's a pretty major city to be able to, if you can see. So.
Cool.
All right, are we ready to talk about Jacob
Mhm.
and Esau? But Jacob's the one we care about.
Not dressed, but go ahead.
Oh, Gary, I'm gonna mute you. Okay. It's like Gary's got a visitor. All right. Let's see. Would somebody read? I will do this one just to avoid any confusion, because I'm going to skip over here and read the last little bit too. So these are the descendants, or we're chapter 25, verse 19. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. See, I was wrong. Abraham was alive when Isaac married Rebekah. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Paddan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. I'm actually going to stop there and we'll do the rest of it later. But from these 10 verses, what stands out to you here? Things you notice.
Well, Rebecca and Sarah both had the same issue,
Mm-hmm.
even though they were not even related technically. You know, it wasn't like Rebecca was Sarah's daughter and kind of ended up with that same situation.
Right. Although Sarah was Abraham's half sister.
Oh, that's right.
But I think my internet must be low because everybody's frozen. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
there it goes.
can hear you.
We still have Gary on mute.
Ah,
Oh, that's
I
fine.
got you, Gary.
Oh, you keep me on mute.
Oh, no way.
We'll unmute you. Okay, well, let's look at verses 19, 20, 21, 19 through 23. Just kind of look at those there. So,
I'll read it. This is
no, I'm just sorry. I'm not
Oh.
asking to read. Sorry. I'm just asking for some discussion.
Well, it starts out right away. The boys are not getting along in the womb. There's conflict already.
Yeah. They're fighting before they even come out.
Right.
It must have been painful for Rebecca because she's saying, if it's to be like this, why do I live?
Mhm.
I'm guessing she's younger than her husband at this point, because Isaac was 40. I mean, that's just a guess. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, we talked about on Tuesday night that with her being a virgin, untouched by a man, and very beautiful, she's probably fairly young when the servant meets her at the well,
Mhm.
based on that time period and that culture. It's almost like Jacob and Esau before they are fighting over who gets the birthright.
Right.
Before they're even born. They're fighting over, because they're twins. So
Right.
one of them's got to be born first. So they're fighting over who gets to be born first.
Mhm.
Well, I wonder too if there, because I know Abraham and Sarah had issues, because Isaac in 26, he's 60 when they're born.
Mm-hmm.
So there were multiple years, 20 plus years that they were together without children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But in this situation, it's resolved in the space of a verse, as opposed to you know, Sarah's barrenness going on for chapters and chapters and chapters.
Mhm.
And it says that Isaac prays to God for Rebekah, and then she conceives. So I wonder why Abraham never thought of that.
Maybe because God kept telling him she would.
Yeah, no, I'm being
Didn't he?
facetious, but yeah.
I know, but I mean, seriously, you know, God
Right.
didn't say that to Isaac or to Esau, Isaac, whoever.
Yeah, Isaac. Yeah.
Isaac, you know, but God did tell Abraham, don't worry, she is going to bear children.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question, and I don't know if this has been discussed or not. Is their year and that time the same period as ours? Because they're stressing the ages of the men so much, and they're so, I mean, they're pretty elderly when they pass on. And I just, the significance of the age.
It's the same amount of time.
Okay.
It's the same amount of time. It's yeah,
I guess the Roman calendar.
they were able to calculate, you know, the changing of the seasons and the year. The calendar was lunar, so it's based off the cycles of the moon, but it still resulted in a fairly accurate year.
Okay.
They just lived longer back then, according to the Bible, but they're going to progressively have shorter and shorter lifespans.
Once the preservatives get in that food.
Yeah, we started with 900 years. So, hi Denise. Oh,
Hi, Denise.
it started with like 900 plus years for Adam, and now we're down to Abraham's got 175. So we're getting down to normal levels, just not quite there yet.
Was Rebecca the first woman to inquire of the Lord? Or I'm trying to remember if Eve, I don't remember Eve going and asking the Lord anything, and I don't remember Sarah.
I think so. And yeah, I think she is the first to inquire, and that she probably went to a sacred site, maybe the altar at Beer-sheba, I don't know, in order to do that inquiry.
Okay.
But this thing that God says to her in verse 23, as far as we know, only Rebekah knows this.
Mm.
As far as we know, Isaac doesn't know it. Jacob and Esau don't know it. But it could possibly be this is the reason that Rebekah prefers Jacob.
Oh.
So, and again, names are important. We're not quite sure what Esau means. It might mean hairy. I don't know. The land Seir, where Esau's descendants end up settling, that Seir is related to the Hebrew word for hairy. And then his descendants are the Edomites, which is why he's called Edom, and Edom means red. And he came out all red and hairy. So Jacob means he takes by the heel. And so they name him Jacob because he comes out holding the heel of Esau, almost like he's trying to drag him back into the womb so he can be first. But it's also a Hebrew idiom that can mean a trickster, one who deceives. You trip people up by grabbing them by the heel, right? So he's somebody who trips people up, tricks them, deceives them, that kind of thing. And so Jacob's name, very apt. It almost reminds me of that book, Freakonomics. Did you ever read that book? We had to read that book in high school, Freakonomics. There's a chapter about naming people and how people sort of live up to their names. They did a study on, people who were named. So there was a couple that named their kids. They named one of their kids Winner and one of their kids Loser.
Oh,
This was in the book. It was based on real life, so I think this was a real thing. Can you guess what happened to Winner and Loser?
Yep.
Yeah, they lived up to their names.
Actually, the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Really?
Loser became very successful. Winner became a deadbeat
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
because their expectations. Loser never expected to win anything, was always put down, had to work twice as hard. Winner felt like he could just skate by and get away with anything. And so actually the opposite. There was another one, they talked about a girl that was named Temptress. You know where that goes. And all sorts of stuff. So names are, anyway, the point of the chapter was names are important. Not to be flippant with names, they're important. And Jacob certainly lives up to his, at least at the beginning of his life.
What
So
was the name of that book again? You said you read, Chris, in high school?
it's called Freakonomics, like economic. Yeah, like
Oh,
economic,
But it's freak.
Freakonomics.
Okay.
Freak. Yeah.
Have to look that
It was
one
a
up.
required reading for, I think, our senior year of high school. Is the book they chose for us to read. So
Oh,
it was interesting. It was an interesting book. It's a nonfiction. It was, about all these studies they did. It was
Right.
really interesting. So, but I remember that name chapter because I thought that was the funniest thing. So, well, we got two boys, two different occupations in conflict with one another. What does that sound like? Familiar?
Oh, the farmers and the something else. Like out west. There were the farmers and the herders? No.
yeah. The
Is that
cowboy.
right?
Well, yeah, it sort of reminds you of Cain and Abel.
You're right.
Oh,
Which was, just like you said, Jennifer, the farmer versus the herder.
right.
It's an age-old conflict. I know, rivalry is the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Only this time, one brother doesn't kill the other, but that's only because the other one runs away. So.
So it's leaving again, leaving to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Although I shouldn't get ahead of myself because that's next time.
Okay.
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
But yeah. Mm-hmm.
We foreshadowed. Oh.
Yeah, and then somebody else said this on Tuesday night. I couldn't imagine not loving any one of my children any more or less than the other one.
Although, don't you think it actually happens more
Oh, I
often
do.
than people might want it to happen? There's a natural gravitation to one child or the other by one of the parents or one
Yeah.
of the many. Do you think this is a lesson in having that kind of thing happen and what could what the result could be?
I don't know. That's a good point. Well, I kind of do, because they end up competing with one another. And I guess that can happen if one parent favors one child, the other parent favors the other. Then they can both feel like they have to fight each other for the love of the other parent.
And when the parents give the children the message, you know, they're doing something that causes them to think it's okay to have that rivalry or that conflict between them. And then it goes a little further probably than they thought it would.
I always said I thought there should be a class that you have to take before you're allowed to have kids.
There's a lot of classes they ought to take before they have kids.
I said this as a lifeguard, as a teenager, as a lifeguard. Some of the parents that came in wouldn't pay attention to their kids. Their kids started drowning. I had to jump in and save them.
Wow.
That only happened like once, but I said, why are you bringing your kids to the pool at 9 o'clock at night on a school night? And not like teenagers. These are like elementary school kids.
Wow.
Anyway, that part of my life is behind me now. Let's look at the last story for tonight here. And so I'm going to read this because I'm gonna skip ahead here also and include those last two verses of the next chapter. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore he was called Edom, which means red. Jacob said, "First sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah.
So he married both of these women at the same time? Or did one come after the other?
I don't know.
Okay.
Now Jacob ends up having two wives as well, remember?
Right. But it always seemed like it was after somebody died that they had their next wife, I think, even though they had their concubines.
Now Jacob has Leah and Rachel at the same time.
Oh, that's
also.
right. That's right. I forgot that story.
Yeah. Just did things a little bit differently back then.
Yes, they did.
So
You know what confused me about this story is Esau is supposed to be such a big guy and strong. He's a huntsman. And I don't know why he just didn't fight him for the stew and, so he could eat it.
Or go back out and look for his own food.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about he must have really and truly been near death. I don't know. I mean, he said, "I'm about to die." I'm thinking, why wouldn't you just go to somebody else and get food somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's been out hunting for a long time and hadn't got anything. Like weeks,
Mhm.
and he has not eaten in a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I mean, has anybody ever fasted before?
Mm-mm.
I highly recommend it. It's a really good
It's
experience.
hard to do.
I I did it for 3 days back in college,
Oh, wow.
Oh,
as a part of I just wanted to do it for a faith practice, just to practice it. I did that twice over my college years. The first time I made a huge mistake in that after the 3 days was over, I kept drinking water. I still drank water, but after the 3 days was over, I was so hungry. I gorged myself on
Uh-oh.
food, and
Yeah.
I got sick, and that was not a good thing. So the second time around, I knew what I was doing. But yeah, after a day without food, man, it's hard. You get pretty weak. You get pretty tired.
Mm.
So if he's really hungry, if he's really that hungry, even though he's stronger, he may be too weak to overpower Jacob
Oh, okay.
because he's so
That makes
hungry.
sense.
Now the text makes a judgment against Esau. It says, thus Esau despised his birthright. It doesn't make a judgment against Jacob at all.
Mhm.
But those of us reading today kind of think Jacob was a bit of a jerk here for doing what he did.
You think
Or-
Esau was tired of being the oldest one, basically always in charge, so to speak? You think he was just tired of having that birthright?
I don't know. I don't know if it was that, or if it was he wasn't thinking straight. He was only thinking about his immediate needs
Mhm.
and not considering the future.
Well, Chris, when you fasted for 3 days, didn't your thinking get a little fuzzy too?
Yeah, I made sure to do it at a time when I didn't have any quizzes or
I was
tests
gonna
or
say.
anything coming up. I
So,
made sure to do it during a light week in my schedule where I really
Uh-huh.
didn't have a lot going on.
because
But
I was kind of thinking of that he was maybe a little confused as well because of the hunger, that he just, okay, fine, I'll do
yeah,
it so I can eat.
it seems to have a one-track mind.
Since it's just the two of them, I mean, he could have said, yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. He could have changed his mind if he wanted to. I don't know what,
In that day and age, the fact that he swears to him an oath basically is legally binding.
hmm.
And keep in mind, God's watching all the time. And so this is they took that pretty seriously. It's the same as later on, like next week when Esau tells Isaac, he said, well, just take your blessing back and give it to me instead, right? And Isaac says, I can't do that. The blessing's already been given. And so the word in those days counted for so much more than it does today, I think. I mean, it really, your word was really your bond. So he's not getting us back.
Now, my footnote in my book, study Bible says the caricature of Esau as a dull person, outwitted on an empty stomach, is intended to explain Israel's domination of Edom during the time of David and Solomon.
That's right. this is a story about Jacob and Esau, but in another sense, it's a story about Israel and Edom, because it would have been read at a time when that was a major political relationship going on. I don't know about any of the rest of you, but I never really noticed verses 34 and 35 in chapter 26. I can't tell you how many times I've heard these two stories, the one that we just read and the one we're going to read next week about Isaac stealing the blessing from Esau. And never in reading those stories do we read verses 34 and 35 that comes before chapter 27. And I feel like it adds just a little bit of a context to the rest of the story. You see, because Esau could not be the descendant that carries on God's promise.
Is that because he married the Canaanite?
Because he married the Canaanite. And so he would have been, I'm not saying he did, but he would have been constantly tempted to follow their religion. And what do you do about the kid? I certainly have great respect for people today who are able to have a multi-faith marriage. I don't mean to put them down in any way or anything like that, but for me, I would think it would be very hard to be married to somebody and not have the same basic beliefs. And then to figure out, okay, how do we raise our children?
Right.
In what faith, and how are they going to, and there are people that make it work. I know there are people that make it work, and that's great. Here in this time when faith is still really, really young, and there's all these sorts of gods to choose from, and the most important thing for this promise is to have faith in the God of Abraham. I don't think that God can really risk having continuing the promise with a family that is divided in terms of faith, which is why they need to go and get wives from Abraham's family. So Isaac goes and gets Rebekah. Now Rebekah is going to send Jacob back to her family, to Laban, to her brother, and that's where he'll get his wives from.
So it's the woman, it's the wife, it's Rebecca who does God's will to carry on the people of Israel. It's interesting. I remember studying, she's one of the matriarchs, that without her, Israel would not have continued. And I always thought about
literally.
her, right. It's right. So I'm thinking, but I said to myself, wow, but she kind of did some tricky stuff there. What does that say?
And again, is it because of what God told her in chapter 25, verse 23? The elder shall serve the younger.
Yeah.
That maybe
And
she knew.
And Jacob was her favorite.
Right.
So it gets me thinking, was it God or was it her?
The answer is yes.
Both, right? Exactly.
Well, that's something that the guy that wrote the commentary I'm using for this study, that's something he says and makes a point of, is that it's both God and the humans involved. The humans don't just sit back and do nothing. They're involved in God's story, but it's not by their own merits that the story progresses. God is involved every step of the way. So it's a both and. I saw a thing on Facebook the other day that had a picture of a guy standing with a shovel, and it said, you can pray for a hole, but if you just stand there with a shovel and don't start digging, you're not going to get it.
That's right. True.
So I think it's important to note that evidently Esau and his wives, they didn't treat Isaac and Rebekah very well. I don't know why. The scripture doesn't really tell us, but they don't seem to care for Isaac and Rebekah very much. So maybe that's another reason we continue on with Jacob. Well, we'll have more Jacob next time.
Yeah. Okay.
I just never thought Genesis would be so interesting. I've said it before.
Thank you, Norma. I love Genesis. It's one of my favorites.
I'm beginning to love it a lot too.
Okay. I am going to actually go ahead and well, I'll ask for prayer concerns. But if you are interested at all in any sort of popcorn, stay on the line after we pray.
Okay.
Did you say you could bring that sign-up sheet to church as well?
Yeah, well, I can show you what I have.
Because if I see it on Wednesday.
And then I can actually bring the popcorn. I can take your order tonight and I can bring the popcorn to you.
Oh.
2 weeks.
Okay.
You're such a good dad.
Are you going to send that popcorn to Arizona? That's what I want to know.
There's actually an online order form, and I'll put the link in the chat, and they will deliver it to you for free.
All right.
Wow.
Ooh, that's amazing.
This is true. They will deliver it to you for free.
Okay.
Now, I'm told that the online popcorn is a little bit different than the in-person popcorn, but I can't ship the in-person popcorn. So.
Okay.
Can you ask for either popped or unpopped?
They have both.
Well, they do. Okay.
Yeah. I'll put that link in the chat there. But let's do prayer concerns first. We got to pray first. So
cool. Okay.
Excuse me.
So prayer concerns for this week.
There we go.
My cousin had her double ankle surgery Tuesday. She went in at 8:30. They took out one rod and she was home by 2 o'clock. I just can't believe it. But she's in a world of hurt right now. Just a couple days later, but hopefully everything will go fine. And thank you for your prayers. I appreciate it. And
Certainly.
I have a very good friend. Go ahead, Beth.
Oh, I didn't say anything. I
Oh,
don't
I
think.
I have a very good friend, Jerry, who's a Dublin Methodist. And I think they were supposed to go in and blast a large kidney stone today
Ooh.
because he was having blood in his urine, and evidently they found it through an X-ray and felt that they were going to try to do that versus surgery to remove it.
Pastor Chris, how did your the meeting for college go this weekend for you?
Nobody came,
Really?
but thank you for asking. Really, really. But I have got two who have told me they are coming this Saturday. So we will start small, but we will continue to grow.
Growth. Good.
Yeah.
Where is
Yeah.
this group coming from?
Just all over. I connected with our church members who are college students in the area.
Oh, okay.
And I'm actually going to pick up on OSU campus. And so I found a better place to do that. And I've been texting with some of our college students that live on OSU campus and have found a spot to pick them up. So I know that two of them are coming on Saturday, at least for sure.
Great.
Plus Allie and myself would make four, Beth. So maybe make one extra serving just in case.
Right.
But
Mhm.
yeah, it was just a perfect storm, I guess, last week. If people had parties or other commitments and then one of them that I was expecting to come actually got sick and couldn't make it. So we'll try again this week, but do keep that in your prayers. You know, if I'm of the philosophy that if you build it, they will come.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you know, if it's not needed, then they won't. But I want to have something. And from my conversations with some of them, they are very excited about it. It's just getting the ball rolling. So.
This past week, I recorded quite a few of the programs on about 9/11. And I would just like for us to keep the families and the first responders and all those involved in our prayers. You know, even after 20 years, there's just so
Right.
much hurt, and it was just, you know, watching it, it was a hard week.
Yep. It sure was.
Yeah.
Did you
agree.
have a big turnout on Saturday for the service, Chris?
I wasn't there because I
Oh.
was getting my house ready for nobody to come.
You won't have to do that this week, then, will you? It's already ready.
You're all set.
Yep. I just had to do some maintenance. So, but I wasn't there. I don't. Anybody else from this crew were there?
Mm-mm.
I'm sure it was a wonderful service. So, Mebane did that service. So. Yeah.
It was pretty breathtaking on TV again, like Beth said.
I can't imagine. I mean, you know, it's been 20 years, but like you said, Beth, the families, you know, grief is connected to significant dates and significant things, you know, about our loved one that we remember. And for a whole nation to remember every year, I mean, you can't forget, you know, it's got to hit you hard because it's everywhere on September 11th.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you lost somebody, I know that's going to come back.
Yeah.
So we'll keep them in our prayers for sure.
Mhm.
Well, let's pray. Almighty God, we thank you so much for this gift of time to gather with one another in your name, to do church and to study your word. We thank you for the example of Isaac and for the example we're about to study of Jacob. We thank you that they're relatable, that they were human just like us, and that we can learn from their faith and how they grew in their relationship over time with you. And I pray that you would continue to teach us through this scripture, through one another, and draw us closer to each other and to you. And tonight, God, we are certainly mindful of those who are in need, of all of those who are ill, all of those who are struggling financially. God, we're mindful of those who've been affected by recent weather events, flooding in Texas, hurricanes and fires. We are mindful of those who are still affected by war and violence. We also particularly, God, remember the families of those whose lives were lost in the attack on September 11th, 20 years ago, the first responders, and all of those whom it affected so deeply. We keep them in our prayers. We pray for Gary's friend, Jerry. We had a kidney stone operation blasting at Dublin Methodist, and pray that that went well and that he recovers well. We pray for Norma's cousin, Sandra, who had ankle surgery on Tuesday, and pray for her continued recovery. Indeed, God, we pray for all who are awaiting surgery, who are recovering from surgeries, all who are dealing with significant illness, and all who are dealing with grief. And we pray that you would bring us back together again next week safely. And thank you once again for this time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank
Okay.
you, Chris.
You're welcome. If you want me to
Thank
sell
you,
you
Chris.
popcorn, you can stay. Otherwise, have a good night.
Thank you. You too. I'm buying online.
Oh, great. Yeah, there's a link there in the chat if you want to buy stuff online.
That's perfect. All right.
Okay.
Talk to you next week.
So,
Okay, bye.
Chris, can we just get it from you up at church?
You can, if you would prefer to do that. I was trying not to bring it to church because I know that Sam was bringing his to church.
Oh, okay.
But if you want, because I have.
Well, let
I
me
can-
just ask you this. Is there caramel corn?
There is. So let me, I was going to do this. Let me pull this up here real quick because it's got all of the stuff right here. And I can actually do a share screen and you can look. And this might be easiest. You know what? I am going to turn off